Welcome, I'm Nina Griffin, and this is the Astrology and Magic channel. Today we'll talk about the astrology of January 2023. First off, I wanted to say thank you to all of my patrons. I appreciate all of your support. If you would like to get content about astrology and magic, as well as my monthly magical elections document, which teaches you how and when to make planetary talismans, you can go to patreon.com/Nina Griffin. First off, let's do a quick recap of December's astrology. Last month I talked about the dramatic full moon of December 7th, which brought a great deal of drama. However, the real change, which was much less loud but far more consequential, was ushered in with Jupiter entering Aries on December 20th. These are all issues that are not flash in the pan necessarily, but will continue to develop in 2023 and have significant consequences as Jupiter passes through Aries. Here's what happened around December 20th. The January 6th committee in the House of Representatives in the U.S. referred Donald Trump's case to the Department of Justice for fraud, false statements, insurrection, and obstructing an official proceeding. Harvey Weinstein was found guilty of rape again, which means he will likely spend the rest of his life in prison. The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, met with the U.S. president and addressed Congress. Most of the continental U.S. experienced a massive winter storm, a so-called bomb cyclone. And the founder of FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried, was arrested, and executives from FTX took plea deals, suggesting that not only will FTX, but likely the whole crypto ecosystem, undergo drastic changes in 2023. Now, the themes for January are far less dramatic. Rather, January is much more about digesting the changes of the previous few months. At this time, chapters, or in some cases, whole cycles, are drawing to a close. And while we have some hints of what is coming, January is actually about integrating and responding to what has already happened before setting out on a new path. January 2nd, Venus enters Aquarius. She enters the diurnal Saturn sign of Aquarius, where she only has minor dignity by bound and decan. As a nocturnal planet, Venus prefers the nocturnal sign of Capricorn. Aquarius, however, is a humane or air sign, so at this point, beauty and pleasure are going to be expressed in cerebral, urbane, and restrained ways. The same day, January 2nd, Mercury will have his evening set at 23 degrees Capricorn. Mercury is retrograde now, and occidental of the Sun, and he and the Sun approach each other with a mutual conjunction. He enters the Sun's beams now and becomes invisible until they pass each other and separate. Now, this loss of visibility sometimes can indicate a loss of power for a planet, but very often it can just mean becoming unseen. Its influences become more hidden. So Mercury in Capricorn could mean negotiations about farming and farm animals, as well as mines and minerals that come from underground, as well as real estate and land in general. If we have any projects in these areas, discussions are best kept confidential for now. January 4th, Venus at 1 Aquarius will sextile Jupiter in Aries. This could be positive for government funding that's beneficial to public works, which is Aquarius, but also military or national security funding. So infrastructure and military funding kind of go hand in hand now. On a personal level, this is generally a fortunate day with two benefic planets in harmonious aspect. It's a good day to try something that requires a little bit of luck. January 6th, we have our full moon at 16 degrees Cancer. The moon herself rules this lunation, as she is in her own sign, and her closest planetary aspects will impact this full moon these 2 weeks the most. Now, in this case, that is the moon's opposition to the Sun and Mercury in Capricorn. This highlights those confidential discussions happening now. Remember how we talked about negotiations regarding land, farming, mines, etc. These will be highlighted for the next 2 weeks. January 7th, Mercury retrograde will conjoin the Sun at 16 degrees Capricorn. This is a so-called inferior conjunction when Mercury is retrograde. It's a moment when Mercury is exactly halfway through his synodic cycle, so in a way it's a moment of peak Mercury. As I've mentioned before, Capricorn is the sign for respiratory diseases for the time being. So this conjunction, if we are lucky, could represent a peak in COVID, flu, RSV cases, the triple-demic. However, a lot of these cases will persist until Mercury leaves Capricorn in March, so it's best to continue to be cautious even as we are starting to see some peaks in these diseases. The second week of January, starting with January 9th, we've got Venus at 8 degrees Aquarius trine Mars retrograde in Gemini. This is a relatively mild aspect, one that will likely impact the weather most visibly. This combination can bring about rain, especially since Mars and Venus are in air signs, which tend to carry a lot of moisture. This trine is also bisected by Jupiter, which sextiles each of the two planets, and this can help raise the temperature, but it also can add moisture. This can mean snow, of course, if you're in the northern hemisphere, or other things like ice and sleet and all of that. On a personal level, Venus trine Mars, of course, can be good for romance. However, of course, we don't want to take it too far because there is a tendency to excess whenever Venus and Mars get together. The next day, January 10th, Mars will station direct after 80 days. Now, this is a period of about 2 days actually before Mars turns direct. So we will feel that direct station a few days in advance of the actual change of direction, which happens January 12th, Mars turning direct at 8 degrees Gemini. So Mars stations direct on Aldebaran, which is the militant and aggressive fixed star at 9 degrees Gemini, the eye of the celestial bull. Now Mars comes out swinging after his retrograde period, but he's not really stronger exactly, as he doesn't have much dignity in Gemini. It's more like he's flailing, but it's sort of safely away from any real opponents who could actually knock him out. Anyway, Mars will be in Gemini until March 25th, and so he's going to be a little bit adrift. He's going to seem to have more of a purpose, but he's not really going to get to engage with really any major opponents. The same day, January 12th, Mercury has his morning rise at 10 degrees Capricorn. We could see major announcements at this time, as often happens when Mercury has his morning or evening rise out of the sun's beams. So those discussions and negotiations that have been brewing since the start of the month now come into full view. As Mercury emerges from the sun's beams, it's a moment of significant power, like coming out onto center stage. Mercury is still retrograde, so even though previous discussions are now fully in view, they are still subject to change and revision. Now, the full extent and meaning of the triple-demic of this winter may finally become visible, perhaps answering some interesting scientific questions about the nature of infection and the interaction of viral diseases. In any case, the cake is not yet fully baked, which can be helpful to those of us who are trying to change things, change the discourse, and participate in making decisions that were previously off limits. The following week, January 18th, Mercury will turn direct at 8 Capricorn. Mercury turns direct and we start having a little more clarity and understanding about what just happened in the last 3 weeks while Mercury was retrograde, as well as what's been happening since Mercury entered Capricorn on December 6th. Again, we're going to see maybe some kind of announcement, but certainly some kind of forward motion, some kind of clear direction for matters involving Mercury, like negotiations, sometimes academics or scholars. January 20th, the Sun enters Aquarius, which is often ushering in the coldest part of winter in the northern hemisphere, as Aquarius is said to be the coldest sign when it comes to weather forecasting. January 21st, we get our new moon at 1 degree Aquarius. This new moon is ruled by Saturn in Aquarius conjoining Venus. This combination will undoubtedly bring a lot of very cold moisture. Again, Aquarius is a very cold sign, and the presence of Venus adds a lot of moisture. The new moon itself sextiles Jupiter and trines Mars, creating potentially stormy weather. The good news is that we see a lot less drama with this new moon than we did with some of the previous lunations, as in December and November. Here we have again more of an integration of what we've seen before, and sort of a tentative start of a new cycle or new things beginning that are going to more fully become evident in February and especially in March of this year. Now the next day, January 22nd, Venus at 24 Aquarius will conjoin Saturn. This often brings a drop in temperature for a couple of days, and we also could get news about women or LGBTQ people now, often negative news. Either people are victims of a repressive force or person, but sometimes themselves as instruments of oppression. January 26th, Venus will enter Pisces. This is Venus's exaltation, so it's a glorious, glamorous, and sometimes even spiritually elevating abode for Venus. She will be entangled in a square to Mars for much of her journey through Pisces, so when we're making Venusian talismans, for example, we will have to avoid that period, as those talismans could have some negative consequences thanks to Mars. Generally, with Venus exalted but afflicted, we get narratives of Venusian people like artists, LGBTQ people, women, etc., who are potentially harmed or embroiled in some kind of conflict or even violence. January 29th, the Sun at 9 degrees Aquarius will trine Mars in Gemini. This is a fiery combination that can bring warmth, but sometimes a swing in temperatures. It's certainly a bit of a boost for Mars, sort of a temporary boost, who has been out in the wilderness for so long, being retrograde and in Gemini. Mars might find a ray of hope here, maybe favor from someone in power, some kind of favorable publicity, for the time being. January 30th, Saturn has his evening set at 25 degrees Aquarius. This is an important annual event. Saturn is coming to the end of his synodic cycle soon, and when he goes under the sun's beams, that is a signal that Saturn is very tired, being at the end of his cycle and is about to be recharged with his conjunction to the sun, which starts off a new Saturn cycle. Now, Saturn in Aquarius has had a strong focus on building infrastructure, especially here in the US, but actually worldwide. Here we've had a huge amount of incentives and government support aimed at making the US the leader in renewable energy, which of course is very Aquarian, having to do with technology and actually the flow of things, because remember, traditionally Aquarius has to do with the flow of water, but in the 21st century, it could just as well be the flow of energy. Infrastructure isn't just roads and bridges. Really, there's a whole new chapter that's starting that's really going to come to fruition in the coming years. Thanks for watching. If you haven't yet seen my whole year 2023 forecast video and you are not a patron, I encourage you to become a patron and get early access to that whole year forecast. I encourage you to subscribe to the Nina Griffin channel on YouTube so that whenever videos are made public, you can get access to them. Thanks for watching. Have a very happy new year.